Hey guys, for today's video, we're going to be toning down my client's blonde hair and giving her more of a lived-in blonde color. For lightening her hair, I'm going to be using Schwarzkopf Blonde Me with 20 volume and Olaplex, and then for the darker color, we're going to be using Guy Tang Identity 6NI. Here's her before. She's pretty grown out. She was pretty blonde last time, and we actually she either wanted to go brighter or wanted to go darker. There's no in between. And I talked her into we're not quite yet into spring. This was actually like in December time. And I told her like we're kind of like in the middle of, fall winter time. Like, why don't we just lay low right now and save the brightening up for actual springtime? So that's what we decided to do, and she was totally okay with that. She was nervous because she normally never wants to like go darker. She's always like, brighten me up, brighten me up. She only gets her hair done like 2 times a year, and she just was like, kept falling back to the darker. So I was like, let's just do it. Let's just go darker. Like, I promise you're gonna like it. And honestly, if not, like the worst case scenario, we throw a few foils back in to brighten you up again. Like, no big deal. So she's like, all right, let's just do it. I wanted to pick something that was closer to her natural color, which is like that kind of an ashy brown, dark blonde. And so I thought the 6NI was a really good, like, not warm, not too ashy, but just kind of a neutral, cool tone. And I really like using the Guy Tang. I like the consistency. I don't know if you guys have used it before. Sometimes I feel like when you're adding depth back into the hair, if you're using like the Schwarzkopf Agora Vibrance, depending on if you're using like the gel or the lotion developer, or like Redken Shades EQ, like it's too thin of like a consistency, and I feel like you have to use so much to really saturate the hair, where I really like using this Guy Tang because it kind of just feels like a permanent color application where you don't have to like overly saturate the hair, where you have to use like a whole bunch in one application or whatever, and then you're pretty much using the whole tube or whatever. You just use a standard amount and then you get good coverage from it. I don't use Guy Tang too often, but every time handfuls of times a year that I end up using this color, I end up always really liking it. So I don't know, maybe I need to like add this back into my, not add it back, but maybe I need to start using it a little bit more again. So I apologize. So for her foils, even though we're going darker, she still wanted to be brighter around her face. So that's why you see me going through and doing like the standard hairline foils that I always do, a little bit brighter around the face. Even though we're going darker, she still wants to be blonde where it counts, which is around the face. When she pulls her hair back, she wants to feel like she has brightness. So we're still going to go through and do like a soft money piece and soft highlights around her hairline. Usually for her money piece, when she likes to be brighter blonde, I go a little bit heavier with my highlight application. I usually do a much stronger like money piece and a lot bolder and brighter around the face. But because we're going to be going darker, even though I wanted her to have some brightness, I wanted it to be much softer than what we normally do. So you can see that I'm just taking some really fine weaves instead of like doing slices or whatever. That way we'll give her just the right amount of brightness. That blends really good with like the dark color that we will be adding. And you can see this whole time that I've been doing her highlights around her face, I'm not adding any dark right here. This is all just blonde. For adding the darker color, I was just going to be doing like a partial application because she has so much dark in her hair already. Like normally when we do her blonde, I'm usually just like staying up top and then painting through the ends. So she already had a lot of her natural color like in the underneath, but you'll see like I kind of had to retrace my steps and like go backwards. I started here doing her application, and then I started thinking about it, and I was like, actually, I think I'm gonna need to break up the blonde a little bit more. So I'm gonna throw these foils in, and then you're gonna see me work like beneath this line. And that's because I was just stupid and didn't realize that I probably should break up the ends a little bit more. So that's my fault. But yeah, so I'm gonna put these foils in, and then one for connection kind of underneath these two in the back center. And then you're gonna see me lift those up and then actually drop a few foils down like through the nape of her neck. And all of these foils that I'm doing right here in this back like nape section, this is all the 6NI. All right, yeah. So you can see that I like had to pin these foils up just to get underneath and break up the hair a little bit more, just to bring some more dimension through the ends. And then I'm gonna just do a few more foils just in this back section, and then we're gonna start working our way back up through the crown again. By the way, I want you guys to pay attention to the size of my application that I'm doing for the dark foils. You can see for generally the blonde foils that I'm doing like a really fine weave. But these darker foils that I'm doing for adding depth back into the hair, it's not necessarily a slice, but I'm just like picking up a heavier and consistent weave. I don't want it to be like a perfect where you can see defined like weaves in the hair, but I definitely want it to be heavier, but not necessarily like just a full chunky slice. Sometimes I feel like if you don't do heavy enough of an application when you're adding like the darker color, like if you do too fine of a weave or just too thin of a section or whatever, sometimes those pieces of depth get lost in the hair. So you'll notice when I am doing my darker foils, I'm usually picking up more hair because I want to make sure that she really notices that she's darker. Like sometimes when a blonde wants to go darker, you're trying to play it like, safe and just do like really fine weaves. What usually ends up happening is it just gets lost and you can't see it. So make sure that you're picking up, a decent amount of hair, enough to really like put that depth back in there, or else they're just gonna feel like a toned down version of blonde again. Okay, so here I go with a blonde weave, and you can see like the weave comparison is a lot finer and thinner than the color of depth that we're putting back in the hair. So even though we're going to do like a root shadow, which by the way, the root shadow that we're doing is basically it's just the same 6 NI. We're just going to tap her roots to blend it all out. But I don't want her to feel like her roots are solid. So even though we're doing a root shadow, I still want to break up her hair a little bit, give her some fine dimensions still in her hair, and make her feel like, you know, not that she has like solid roots, but just adding a fine like blonde weave in there to help break up her grow out. A lot of times when people say that they want to be rooty, that to me doesn't mean that they don't want any highlights. I feel like they still want a little bit of dimension and to feel like their roots are broken up a little bit. Like, people will generally always tell me like, I don't want any highlights. Like, I want all of my natural in the root area. Well, if you're going to be doing like a foliage or whatever, and you're doing your application and you're dropping it down like, you know, 3 or 4 inches off the scalp, and then it's just all of their solid natural roots, within like 2 months, they're going to feel like they need to come back in, when really they should have a lot of longevity. This is supposed to be like a low maintenance color. They want to be able to go a while in between services without feeling like they have to come in. Well, if you're doing your application truly like 3 or 4 inches off the scalp, then in 2 months, they're going to have like 5 inches of grow out in their root area. And they're going to be like, oh my gosh, my hair is so dark, I need to come back in again. So I always go through, and I still, even if I do like a really fine weave, I will still go through and break up the roots. And then I'll go back, you know, with a highlight. And then I'll go back through with a root shadow and tap the roots to like add that depth back into the root area. But you'll see when we're done with her color that she still has some dimension in her roots. And then by the time her hair starts growing out and like the highlights start fading a little bit and the toner starts fading out, her highlights are going to be grown out enough to where it like slowly starts showing through, and she feels like, oh, I'm still feeling like I'm kind of bright, you know, and she's not going to feel like she needs to come back in again for quite a few months. All right, so for her money piece area, I did those really fine weaves for her money piece. Well, right on top of her money piece, these next few sections that I'm going to do, right here, this hair that's going to be laying on top of, you know, when her hair's down and styled and everything, this foil that I'm doing right here is going to be like a dark veil that falls on top of the blonde money piece. This is going to tone down her money piece just a little bit. That blonde is going to fall kind of underneath directly like on her hairline. And then she's going to have like a darker shadow color, you know, kind of falling over her money piece to give her that depth that she's feeling. She's still going to have brightness directly on her face, but she's going to have this darkness kind of falling over everything else, where the blonde will kind of be underneath, and she's going to have like a darker veil falling over everything. I hope that makes sense. Sometimes I feel like, does it sound like I know what I'm talking about? Like, do you guys understand what I'm saying, or do I just sound like a dumbass? I don't know. I don't want to bore you guys, but this is basically what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the application. We're just going to be flipping back and forth and doing dark blonde all the way through the top of her head. I do want to say I'm going back and forth. Like, I'm going to do a few foils, flip to the other side, do a few foils, flip back to the other side, do a few foils. Especially with dark color, when you're going over blonde hair is porous, so it can like really suck up that color and absorb it and go darker the longer that it sits. So say that I do one side of the head, which could be like, you know, 30 minutes of an application, and then that color sits there for 30 minutes before I even get to the other side. That that will have like twice as much time to process as the other side. So by the time I'm like done with her application and wash her out, like that side could have already grabbed like 2 shades darker than the other side if I go one full side and then flip and finally eventually get back to the other side. So if you see me going back and forth, that's why, because I want to make sure that this dark has even opportunity to deposit equally on both sides. That way it will like turn out nice and even, because whew, have you ever like, I mean, like, I just have anxiety. Like, I'm going to think of everything. Porous hair, going dark with porous hair, and all of it just sucking up and, like, going dark on one side, and then finally going to the other side and has half the time to process, and then it's going to be not as dark. Good Lord, let me just flip back and forth to make sure that everything turns out nice and even. So, and also, if you're doing darker, like, start in the back, because the underneath and the back sides are a little bit like naturally, that's where it's darker anyways. So if it grabs a little bit darker in the back and underneath, that's okay, because it's gonna mimic, you know, how hair naturally is. So, you know, just don't worry about it if you start in the dark. If you start in the back, but if you start in the front, I mean, that color could really grab, and then you're going to have really darker pieces in the front than you do in the... It could just be a whole mess. So just flip back and forth on both sides and start your dark foils in the back, and you will be good, honey. Okay, we're going to finish up this foil just all the way straight over the top of her head. And by the way, don't hate me. My phone ran out of storage and it died on me and stopped recording. But thank you, Jesus, I was able to like get the after. So I apologize ahead of time. This is the end of the foil application that you guys are going to see. But here's what I toned with. My all over blonde toner, I use Blonde Solutions in Platinum. And then for the root shadow, I use the same as the depth color, that 6 NI. So here's her before, definitely like a lot heavier of a blonde. And here's her after. Look at how pretty. See what I'm talking about? Even though we went through and did a root shadow, those highlights are still showing through really soft. Still brighter on the face and just so pretty. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.